145. Providence. Chalcedon Report number 131, July 1976. As was pointed out earlier, report number 123, Christianity establishes distinctions and requires a division in terms of God between sin and righteousness, good and evil, and between the saved and the lost. Matthew chapter 10, verses 34 and 35. There is a required line of separation, but the line must be God's, not man's. As humanism flourishes, however, the exaltation of man leads to a progressive equalization of all men, the criminal and the law-abiding, the rich and the poor, the intelligent and the dull-witted, and all others are levelled into one common status in the name of democracy and equality. For humanism, all things are relative to man, so that no standard can be allowed to judge man, who is himself the only standard. Whenever man is affirmed as the standard, life and the world, as well as God, are negated. If man is his own God and law, no outside standard or law can judge him. The result is the collapse of all standards and of society's ability to progress. If man is his own God, then, because there is no need for a God to improve, progress, or be educated, there is no need for man to change or improve himself. Early in man's history, the Far East developed the great civilizations, reached a high estate, and then stagnated or collapsed. Why did Asia lose its eminence? From an area of growth and vitality, it turned into an area of decay and of defeatism. Its philosophies uniformly came to a position of world and life negation. The reason for this decay was the triumph of humanism and the negation of all absolutes other than man. Kuan Yin, the Chinese goddess of mercy, typified this triumphant humanism. She refused to enter heaven, supposedly declaring, "Never will I receive individual salvation until every last man born or to be born is received into heaven." This equalitarian creed means no heaven and no peace on earth. Heaven can only be heaven if all are saved, and earth can be good only if all are held to be equally good and equally deserving of the best. But this is impossible, and the result is cynicism, despair, and pessimism. Without standards, and with only a total democracy of all men and values, not only are good and evil equal, but all men, and life and death, are also equal. Nothing has meaning, and the result of all this democratic faith and love of all things was the equal hatred of all things, and, in the end, a belief only in nothingness. As a result, Asiatic thought on life decayed. Its basic premise was, in effect, the exaltation of nothingness. This strain of thought invaded Greece and contributed to its decay. This same nihilism was a factor in the fall of Rome. The Middle Ages decayed as the same humanistic relativism became again prominent, and wandering folk singers and student rebels propagated the faith from place to place, and churchmen echoed it from the pulpit. Today, the same situation confronts us. The logic of modern humanism has led to the same collapse of values. As a result, modern men find the old faiths of Asia, a while ago rapidly being tossed onto the garbage piles of civilization, suddenly very attractive. Their nothingness finds an echo in modern man's emptiness. Zen Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, transcendental meditation, and much more are being dragged out, dusted off, and pressed into reuse for the funeral of modern man. In these faiths, there is no providence, only nothingness and the lonely thoughts of man projected against an ocean of meaninglessness. Love is affirmed, and a vague hope that there is some kind of impersonal tendency in the universe which is congenial to man's ideas. But this is only a profession of desires, not a description of reality. How long can a man under pressure be sustained by a vague belief in a mindless, quote, goodness, end quote, of sorts? A universe stripped of providence is a universe stripped of God and meaning. Love and hate, good and evil, and life and death are then equally meaningless. When man makes himself God, he not only robs the universe of meaning, but also himself. The line between man and the animals is broken down, and the line between organic and inorganic becomes also vague and indistinct. When God declares, "Ye shall be holy, for I the Lord your God am holy," Leviticus chapter 19 verse 2, he is declaring himself to be separate and calling upon us to be separated in terms of his law, calling and covenant. The principle of his creation and recreation is holiness, the separation of all things in terms of his creative purpose and calling. Man is called to understand the meaning of God's holiness and to develop that line of division in all creation. A line must be drawn between the holy and the profane, that which is brought under the dominion of God's kingdom, or temple, and that which is outside of it. Because of the fall, the world and its peoples are profane. First, they must be made holy by God's grace, which we must proclaim. Second, in terms of this law, all things and men must be developed in terms of their potential and dedicated to the purposes of God's kingdom. Holiness requires dominion. No dominion means no holiness, which indicates a profane estate. The modern forms of the Kuan Yin philosophy indicate that ultimate profanity is exalted into ultimate bliss and salvation. All things must be separated from God, according to this faith, in terms of the equality of nothingness. The Kuan Yin faith is hostile to separation and to progress. The idea of, quote, advance, end quote, it promises, is a levelling of all things to the lowest common denominator. As a result, the modern devotees of Kuan Yinism are hostile to Christianity, progress, technology, freedom, and all things else which further the line of divisions among men and nations. All must be levelled. Let us remember, as we see this exaltation of levelling, that, for the Middle Ages, quite rightly, the great symbol and illustration of equality and democracy was death.